Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak Prana Chakshushotramatho Balamindriyani Cha Sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryang Mama Brahma Nirakarod Anirakaranamastu Anirakaranam Mestu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishatsu Dharma Stay mai santu, te mai santu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May my limbs, speech, vital force, eyes, ears, as also strength and all the organs become well developed. Everything is the Brahman revealed in the Upanishads. May I not deny Brahman, may not Brahman deny me. Let there be no spurning of me by Brahman. Let there be no rejection of Brahman by me. May all the virtues that are spoken of in the Upanishads repose in me who am engaged in the pursuit of the self. May they repose in me. Om, peace, peace, peace. So we are studying the Kena Upanishad, and we started with the question of the student. The student asked this question. Keneshitam patati preshitam manah kena prana prathama praiti yukta keneshitam vacham imam vadanti chakshushrotram kaudeva yunakti. So that's a very deep and very advanced question, actually. How are we having this first person subjective experience, this conscious experience we call life? The way he puts it is, so my mind, we think about things. Why does my mind think about stuff? What in the precise formulation of the question is, in the presence of which luminous entity and directed or controlled by what does my mind think about things? Do thoughts come in my mind? Illumined by what luminous entity do I see? Do I hear? What enables this prana to function, which enlivens the whole body, all the physiological functions, which makes this body a living body? And speech, the experience of speaking. How do I get this experience of speaking? Now, we discussed how deep the question is. The student is basically saying that this material body by itself could not give the experience of thinking, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching. Now, the question has been sharpened further by our new discoveries and inventions, for example, AI. Now, you have these very clever machines which can process text. They can compose poetry, do your assignments, write a newspaper article, make a movie for you, draw enormous amount of creative activity, which we thought till now only human beings could do. All these activities which the student is talking about, cognitive activity, sensory activity, speech, all of this, perhaps without the physiological side of it, the prana, all of this is going on. The AI can imitate and replicate, but the AI does not have conscious experience. So internally, there is, as far as we can see, and all the experts will tell us, when we are thinking and imagining and enjoying and suffering, we have an experience. The AI does not have any experience with it. It's a machine working with algorithms. You give inputs, it'll sort information, move information around, and give you remarkable results backed up by enormous computing power. Amazing. But that just reinforces the question that in all of these experiences, like thinking or like seeing or hearing, there are always these two sides. One is the material side of it, the process, the physical side of it, the biological side of it. In the case of the mind, the psychological side of it. And there's the other side of it, which is the subjective experience, how it feels like from inside. This feels like from inside is what consciousness does. And the student's question is about that. So, and I think this question, Swami Vivekananda said these are ancient questions, and obviously going all the way back to the Upanishads. And he says that it's not that answers were not found, answers were found, but each generation needs to ask these questions again for themselves, and the answers will roll down the centuries and millennia, gathering strength, newer dimensions. So in our day and age, the same question is being asked again as the hard problem of consciousness. And the question is sharpened and deepened by, say, AI, for example. Yeah, but it is the same question. Now, the answer is equally remarkable. The teacher replied, so you want to know which luminous entity is behind all our conscious experiences, like thinking, life itself, speaking, hearing, seeing? And the student says, yes. Which entity is behind all of this? And the teacher replies, Shrotrasya shrotram manaso mano yad vachoha vacham sau pranasya pranaha chakshushas chakshuratimuchya dhira pretyasmad lokadamrita bhavanti. A very power-packed answer. In one sense, the rest of the Upanishad is an expansion on this answer. So what is the direct answer? The question was deep and direct, and the answer is also equally measures up to the question, exceeds the question. Direct answer, no beating about the bush here. But in an elliptical language, in a strange language, the teacher says, the answer is, what you want to know is the ear of the ear. How do you have experience of hearing? How does the ear hear? You want to know. He says, yes, I want to know that. The answer is because of the ear of the ear. How does the mind have the experience of thinking? Because of the mind of the mind. And speech, because of the speech of the speech. Because of the eye of the eye, and the life of the life, the pranasya pranaha. So what you're asking for, this is what you're asking for. The question you asked, the answer to that is ear of the ear, mind of the mind, speech of the speech, life of the life, eye of the eye. So, and knowing this, the qualified one, the spiritual seekers who is qualified, when this person realizes this entity, realizes in the sense, I am this entity, this is my real nature. This person transcends while living in this body and mind, while thinking, while speaking, while seeing, and while hearing. It's a philosophy of, where with eyes open, as much as with eyes closed in meditation. You realize that you are this deathless, luminous entity. While living, you are free of suffering and the human limitations. And after the death of the body, this qualified seeker who's now an enlightened being attains this bodiless liberation, videha mukti. So the answer points to something in a mysterious language, points to something and says that if you realize it, it gives you the person who can take benefit of it. It uses the word dhiraha. We'll see more about what is meant here. And then says such a person, the benefit this person will get is that you have to realize that I am this entity. What entity? The ear of the ear, mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, etc., etc. This one entity I am, and therefore I am deathless. I was not born with the birth of the body. I will not die with the death of the body. I do not awaken with the awakening of the mind. I do not dream with the dreaming of the mind. I do not go to sleep with the sleeping of the mind. I am there illumining all sensory activity or activity of motor organs like speech. I am there because of which the life is functioning. Realizing my real nature, I transcend these human limitations, especially birth and death, and attain to eternal freedom. So this is the answer. Why such language? The reason being that when the teacher said ear of the ear, shrotrasya shrotram, he could have just as well said consciousness. But he said ear of the ear, showing thereby what you are asking for. How do I get the first person experience of, say, listening? Right now we are all listening. How do I get this experience? The answer will not be complete if you just describe how the ear is functioning. Understand this? It's very interesting. A materialist answer would be, You want to know how you get the experience of hearing? Well, study the ear and the nervous system and the brain. That's it. You'll get a complete explanation. But now we know that that may not be enough, because consciousness itself is not explained by the brain and the nervous system. So he says that it is something different from the ear, and by that we mean something different from not only the ear and the auditory canal and the nerves and the brain centers. It's different from the ear, different from the nerves, different from the brain, different from the body. Something distinct, quite distinct from this material substratum, this physical thing. Something distinct. At the same time, it's not something separate and somewhere else. It's right here. Last time I gave the example of the electricity. What makes all these diverse electrical and electronic equipment do what they are doing, the various different things? There's one common factor, which is when you plug them in, electricity goes into them and makes them do these different things. The different things they are designed to do. The computer and the light and the fan and the heater, they are all designed to do different things. But they all require one thing in the background, one thing which has to pervade them, which is electricity. Similarly, this one consciousness, which is distinct from the ear and yet illumines the functioning of the ear. The ear does what it has to do. It receives the sound waves and then converts them into nerve impulses in the auditory nerves. And then there's definitely something going on in the brain. And beyond that, which we don't know yet in modern science, some vritti, some movement is set up in the lake of the mind. It's like throwing a stone into a lake and ripples are set up. The stone is the sound which comes in through the ear and converted into nerve impulses and definitely going to the brain. And from there to the mind, we don't know. Nobody can explain exactly what's the link between the brain and the mind. But the Upanishad is going deeper. The mind, there is a ripple in the mind. There is a thought, a vritti about that sound, which has come in through the ears and the nervous system. And that vritti, that movement in the mind is illumined by consciousness reflected in that movement. Then only we get the experience of hearing. That's why he uses the language like ear of the ear, to show that consciousness is distinct from the physical and even the psychological mechanism, and yet pervades the physical and psychological mechanism. It's there, it's right here. So this is what is being said here. You could have just as well said consciousness, but then what will happen is, I mentioned last time, the problem is that we already have an idea of what we mean by consciousness. In modern consciousness studies, for example, what we mean by consciousness is precisely what the student is asking. We hear, we see, we think, we remember, we enjoy, we suffer. All these activities at the physiological and psychological level, this is what we think is consciousness. If you say consciousness, that will be, we'll mistake it for that. Suppose you say it is the self, it is you. That's what he wants to say. The master wants to say that ultimately, that it is you. But if you say that, we already have an idea of what it means to be me. I think I am this physiological body mind. Again, I'll mistake the master's answer for the body mind. If the master says you, the Atma, is what you're asking about, already we in ignorance, and presumably the student also, thinks that I am the body mind. So you mean I am the body mind is responsible for seeing, hearing, thinking, and so on. So if you say directly Atma, it will not work, the self, because we think the self is body mind. If you say it is consciousness, it still won't work, because we have an idea of what consciousness is, which is the conscious activity of the mind and the senses. In any case, the student is asking that only, how that conscious activity happens. So therefore, he has to use this elliptical language, this rather clever use of language, indirect way of pointing to it. It's a pointing language. It's trying to point out something to us. Now, all this I mentioned in the last class. Now, in this class, I want to read out some very nice portions from Shankaracharya's commentary. He has written 2 commentaries on the Kena Upanishad, the Padabhashya and the Vakya Bhashya. From the Padabhashya, we are going to use that long commentary on this most important of mantras.
So I'm just going to take up some very interesting portions. And these extracts you will see, they will not at all be out of place in a modern discussion, in maybe in a philosophy of mind class in university departments, or in a neuroscience or consciousness studies group. And they're exactly discussing these things, what Shankaracharya is trying to explain 1400, 1300 years ago. All right. Now the commentary, he starts with a question. Um, so the student asked a question, how do I get the experience of hearing? How does the ear hear? Illumined by what luminous being? And the teacher's answer was, you want to know the luminous being in whose presence you have the experience of hearing? Yes. Well, it is the ear of the ear. Now a question is asked. I'll read out the Sanskrit and then give the gist of the Sanskrit. The question is now raised. Aso evam vishishta shrotradini niyungte iti vaktavye nanu etad ananurupam prativachanam shrotrasya shrotramiti. The student or somebody else asks this question, objects to the language of the teacher, says that the question was asked, who is responsible or what is responsible for our experience of hearing? And the answer should have been, such and such entity with such properties and characteristics is responsible for the experience of hearing. And instead of saying that, you said ear of the ear. And the ear of the ear is not an appropriate answer. We don't get anything out of it. What is an ear of the ear? What do you mean ear of the ear? The direct answer should have been X with characteristics 1, 2, 3 is what you are looking for, what your question is. And this is the answer. Some entity with certain characteristics, the teacher should have said, this is what you are looking for. But he just said, ear of the ear. How does the ear hear? Ear of the ear. Why such language, and what purpose does it serve? And we don't get anything out of this. We don't get it. Answer. Shankaracharya says, Naisha doshaha. There is no defect here. Tasya anyatha visheshena vishesha anavagamat. There is no other way of answering it, he says. Why? Vishesha anavagamat. There is no characteristic by which this entity can be described. Pure consciousness, Atman, Brahman, has no distinguishing characteristic by which we can point it out. Therefore, indirect language is necessary. I've mentioned this earlier, and Shankaracharya also will mention later on in his commentary, why language cannot directly refer to Atman, to pure consciousness or Brahman. I have mentioned on other occasions, language requires one of at least 5 characteristics, 5 features, any one of which, if it is present in any entity, you can use language to refer to that entity. Any one of these 5 features. What are these 5 features? A class. So, for example, cow is a class of animals. And then you can point to a cow and say, that animal is a cow. It belongs to a class called cow, which has similar properties. So, class of entities with similar properties. If that is there, you can refer to it, a human being or a computer. So, it belongs to a certain class of entities. Then another way of using language would be qualities. So, suppose there is a bouquet of flowers, and you say, get me a red flower or get me a pink flower. Now, how did you refer to the flower? How do people understand what you mean? They use the color of the flower. There are lots of flowers in the bouquet. And when you ask for a particular flower, when I say, get me a pink flower or a red flower, the red color or the pink color allows you to understand what I mean. You look at the color and you pick out that particular flower, and you have understood what I meant. But then because it has a color, that's why. That's a quality. It could be any kind of quality, not just color. Then there is another way, kriya, function, action, like a cook or a driver or a typist or something like that, or a pilot. These are people, so they are defined by their actions. Say the flight is delayed because we can't find the pilot, or I hope that never happens, but Whom are you looking for? One individual whose function it is to fly the plane. If some entity has a function, you can use that function to refer to them, use language for that. Another way could be sambandha, relation, teacher, student, father, children. So these are ways in which relations can be used. And the last one is called conventional designation. You just give a name, use a word for something. It doesn't matter whether it's a class or an action or a relationship. That's called ruri or conventional designation. Now the problem is Atman, Brahman, pure consciousness has none of these 5 factors. Think about it. Atman or the Brahman, if it does exist, the Upanishads speak of it as having no particular class. It does not belong to a set. There is only one Atman. There is only one Brahman. It's one and non-dual. So there is no class of Brahmans or class of ultimate realities to which it belongs, like a cow belonging to a class of animals. You can't use a class designator. Second, it has no qualities. Pure consciousness does not have any qualities. Then it's nirguna, without any attribute. Therefore, you cannot use a quality like is it red or is it big or is it small or no, you can't use any qualities to refer to it. Therefore, that will not work. Third one was action. It is nishkriya, beyond all activity and change. Therefore, you cannot use any change, any activity to refer to that entity. Fourth is it is beyond all relations. Relations require at least 2 entities, father and children, teacher and students. At least 2 terms are required to establish a relationship. But if the ultimate reality is non-dual, there is no second reality apart from it, you can't have a relation with that. So relation also won't work. Now the last one, conventional designation, it works like this. Suppose someone's name is Ram or Sita or Mary or John or something. Why don't just give a name to this thing? Call it Brahman, call it the absolute, call it something, emptiness or whatever, and be done with it. That also won't work, because the process of naming something requires you to point out that entity. If you say this person is Rama, you will ask which person, and I have to say this person. If I don't say anything, I say just call Rama. You say who's Rama? I won't tell you. Then it won't work. You have to point out the person. This baby will be called Mary from now on. So which baby? You have to point out the baby, otherwise the naming will not work. Now you can't use a word like Atman, Brahman, Turiya, ultimate reality, unless you're able to point out what you are, show what you are trying to name. And it can't be shown. It's not something that you can see or hear or smell or taste or touch. It's not even something you can conceive or speak about. So therefore, these are the reasons why language cannot directly refer to it, because it does not have any of the 5 features which will enable language to function. Shabda pravritti nimitta rahitatva, that's the Sanskrit phrase, because the instigators of linguistic usage are absent in the absolute reality. So that which leads us to, that which allows us to use language, that's not present. And so you can't use direct speech. You can't directly say. The teacher cannot directly answer what the student is saying. And Shankaracharya uses, a very simple example. He says, a farmer with a sickle, operating a sickle. Now you can, if somebody asks, what is the entity behind the operation of a sickle? You can mention the farmer. Here is this farmer, he looks like that, that's his name, he stays in that hut, and this is his field. He is the operator of the sickle. He uses the sickle to cut wheat or whatever. But it's not like that here. There is no separate entity called Atman, Brahman, which exists with certain characteristics like the farmer, which you can point out apart from the sickle is like the body-mind instrument. You can't point it out like that. It's not another entity, separate entity with characteristics which you can point out. Then how do we know such entities there? Very beautiful phrase he uses. Phala avasana linge navagamyate. Asti hi shrotradi rasanghataha yat prayojana prayukta shrotradi kalapa grihadivat sanghatanam pararthatvat avagamyate shrotradi nam prayokta. Okay. What he says is, You know it by its results. This is a beautiful point. How do we know at all? If no language can refer to this pure consciousness, it does not have any characteristics by which you can point it out. Then why even speak about such a thing? It says because of the results. What are the results? What do we observe? We observe that we have conscious experience. All of us are having conscious experience and we can't explain how. That's why you're asking this question. Oh, student, you're asking this question. How is it that my eyes are having the experience of seeing? How is it that my ears are having the experience of hearing? How am I thinking? How am I having the experience of pleasure, pain, desire, restlessness, peace, all of that? How? What's enabling all of this? Waking, dreaming, sleeping even. What's enabling all of this? So by this data, we have the data. What is the data? Our conscious life, our life itself. It's not possible just with a body, just with a brain. It's not possible. Even with a subtle body like the mind, it's not possible. This conscious experience we are having, you can't explain it otherwise. Now, Shankaracharya uses an ancient argument borrowed from Sankhya philosophy. He says, Sanghatanam pararthatvad avagamyate. A complex is always for something other than the complex. Shankaracharya uses the example of grihadivat. So you have a house, for example, and the house is meant for you. See, the door is not meant for the floor, the ceiling is not meant for the shelf, the washroom is not meant for the kitchen. Whose purpose does the washroom and the kitchen and the door and the ceiling and the floor, whom does it serve? Nothing in the house. This is a good example. Nothing in the house. It is something quite distinct from the house for whom the house exists and whose purpose is the house serves. What is that? It's you. You are not part of any part of the house. You're not something that's going on in the house itself. You're not part of the electrical system. You're not part of the heating system. You're not part of the music system, or the water. No. All of these systems are there in place and functioning for something quite distinct from the house, which is the owner of the house, the inhabitant of the house. A complex entity exists for something apart from that complex entity. Another simpler, cute example is the bed. So in the bed, you have a mattress and the pillow and the blanket. The blanket is not meant for the pillow. The pillow is not meant for the mattress, or the mattress for the pillow. All of them are meant for you, the one who's going to sleep in that bed. Similarly, he says, this body and mind is a conglomeration, and it serves the purpose of something distinct from the conglomeration. This conglomeration, this generates something, definitely. There is something which is physical and even psychological going on when you hear something. When you hear something, a sound, there's a physical part of it, which the ear doctor can check. There's a neurological part of it in the brain, which the brain scientist or the doctor, neuroscientist can check. There's a psychological part of hearing also, which the psychologist can help you with. But beyond that, you have the experience of hearing. Here is the distinction. The eyes, for example. I am seeing all of you and I have the experience of seeing you, colors, shapes, people, and there's an experience. And right in front of me is a camera which is taking my picture and conveying it to all of you. The camera does not have the experience of seeing. See, the mechanism of the camera is pretty similar to the mechanism of the eye, pretty similar. It imitates. It has a very sophisticated copy of the functioning of the biological eye. But behind the biological eye, as the student asked this question, how do I have the experience of seeing? What luminous entity illumines my seeing? There is no luminous entity there in that camera which illumines the seeing of the camera. It transmits information to you and reconstitutes the picture. Then your eye takes in that information and then you have the experience of seeing. So this physiological, extremely complicated house or bed, the physiological part of it, and the neurological, the psychological part of it, all of it is like a house or like a bed. very sophisticated system, but meant for consciousness, which illumines it and has the conscious experience of seeing. Eyes, optic nerves, brain center, mind behind that. There's a vritti in the mind whenever we have visual impulses. And all of that is illumined by consciousness. Especially the mind is directly illumined by consciousness. So this is what his argument. It's borrowed from Sankhya. Sankhya uses this argument to establish the possibility of consciousness apart from material nature. You know, Sankhya philosophy is a dualistic philosophy. One, it says this material universe is there. Here is this universe. Time, space, matter, energy, vast, uh, powerful, complicated. And there is an experiencing entity called consciousness. And according to Sankhya, you cannot reduce consciousness to matter. You cannot reduce matter to consciousness. They are distinct entities operating with each other. It's a very, it's the most ancient philosophy in India, going back to Kapila. Swami Vivekananda called Kapila the first philosopher of the human race. And you can see why it is very satisfying logically, because that's how he experienced the world. I am the subject, everything else is object to me. Everything else is object to me. And Sankhya says, you are right. You, the subject, you are consciousness. And everything else, whatever you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, whatever your instruments can reveal, all of that is material nature, Prakriti. You are consciousness, Purusha. Now, the Sankhyans are faced with a question. Prakriti is clearly there. Why would you say there is a Purusha? And Sankhya's would use multiple arguments, one of which powerful one is this. A complex is always meant for something apart from a complex. Prakriti is a tremendous complex. The body is a complex. It's meant for the consciousness which experiences the body. It goes back to the Sankhyan idea of the two cooperating. Prakriti gives experiences to Purusha, and Purusha provides Prakriti with illumination, with meaning, with awareness. And the two together are us, you, I. We are a combination of nature and consciousness, Prakriti and Purusha. So, Shankaracharya borrows that ancient argument. What is the argument? If you put it precisely, Sanghata Pararthatvat. Sanghata is a combination, a compound, a conglomeration, a system which is functioning. And it's the body is a system, the whole of the universe is a system. And the Sankhyan said it's functioning for consciousness. And Shankaracharya says this ear of the ear starting with the physical ears, going all the way up to the optic nerves and the mind associated with the sound, all of that is a conglomeration, and it is meant for, it is illumined by consciousness, which gives you the experience of hearing. One way of putting this argument would be, the conglomeration by itself does not give you conscious experience. There must be something apart from the conglomeration which will enable you to have conscious experience. All right. The objector, the person who asked the question, don't forget, we are still on year of the year. Year of the year is going on. The questioner says, I see what you mean, but that doesn't really solve the problem. What does year of the year mean? Why did you use year of the year? Because after all, it's like saying light of the light. A light does not require another light. We always use the Jyoti, Jyotira Jyoti. Yeah? We sing every day in Arati, Jyotira Jyoti, light of light. Upanishad says the light of lights. But a light does not require another light. Similarly, a year does not require another year. What do you mean year of the year? It doesn't make any sense. I understand what you are saying. There's something apart from the year is necessary to give you conscious experience. But why is it year of the year? What does year of the year mean anyway? And we don't see something like light of the light. The questioner asks, Ka puna atra padartha shrotrasya shrotram ityadehe. What entity are you talking about? When you say ear of the ear, mind of the mind, speech of the speech, what entity? Nahi yatra shrotrasya antarenartha. Clearly, you don't mean there's an actual ear. There's an outer ear and there's an inner ear, which there is an inner part of the ear, but it's not another ear inside a ear. Then there's no end to it, because then that ear will require another ear if it's actually an ear. And if you say the answer to your question is ear of the ear, if it's really another ear which you mean, then that ear will also require another ear, and there's no end of you have limitless ears going on. And it's not necessary. Just as light does not require another light, one light lights it up and it reveals itself. Similarly, then Shankaracharya says, Naisha dosha, there is no fault here. Why not? Tattu svavishaya vyanjana samarthyam shrotrasya chaitanya hi atma jyotishi nitye asanghate sarvantare sati bhavati na sati iti. He's saying the same thing in another way around. He says, ear of the ear necessary because this system for the called the ear is not sufficient to explain, to illumine its object sound. Let me repeat that. This entire system, which is meant for hearing, can't explain how you have the conscious experience of hearing. It explains one side of it, how sounds come and they're processed and they're sent to the brain, that part of it. But how are you getting a conscious experience of hearing? Clearly, the camera doesn't have a conscious experience of seeing me. Although it has quote unquote eyes, the microphone through which I'm speaking doesn't have the conscious experience. It's not, you're all listening to me and having an experience. This microphone here, through which I'm speaking to you, it's the first one which hears me, but it doesn't have the experience of listening to me. It's not listening to me. Listening in what sense? Two senses of what the word listening are there. One is the mechanical side of it. Yes, it is collecting sound. Yes, it is transmitting sound, processing it into electrical impulses and then sending it to computer, which is transforming it into information and then sending it out an amazing, stunning network across the world, and it's reconstituted, made into sound again, sound waves, and comes into your ear, which again processes it. But finally, what happens in you is something quite apart from all this electrical, computational, satellite, and then finally physiological processing, neurological processing. Quite apart from it, conscious experience happens. And he says it's not enough. The ear is not enough to explain that. He says, Tattu svavishaya vyanjana samarthyam, to illumine its object, sound. Without what? He says, Chaitanya Hyatma Jyotishi, without consciousness, without the light of the self. And he says, Nitya, which is always there. Notice, the sound comes and goes. Each sound is coming and going. The sights which you see keep changing. The smells keep changing. The tastes come and go. Thoughts in the mind come and go. Memories come and go. Feelings come and go. But always there is conscious experience. Consciousness is constantly there, Nitya. Asanghate, very interesting use of words. Uncompounded, not part of the conglomeration, not part of that by which you are having the experience of hearing. That one is not part of this microphone. It's not part of the computer. It's not part of the worldwide network of transmitting information over the internet. It's not part of even your own ears, your own nervous system, your own brain. No. And that entity which is giving you that conscious experience right now is asanghata, not part of this amazing conglomeration. This amazing conglomeration is all part of nature, Prakriti. Where is it? I can point to the ear is here. Where is the ear of the ear? He says, I can point it out to you. Sarvantare, innermost. What do you mean innermost? In your own conscious experience, you can locate consciousness as the innermost. Innermost is not physically innermost. In your experience, there is the world which is experienced, that is outermost. That includes the body too. Then there are sensations, if you see in your experience. Then there is processing in the level of the mind, thoughts, memories, feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, desires, and all of that. Then there is a subtler level of understanding, clarity. I am having this experience. Beyond that is blankness. Beyond that is you, this consciousness. Beyond that is this light, which is innermost. You can't go any inner than that. But if you actually trace it out, you will say, but that's me, that's I, that is I. Yes, that light is you. The innermost, what is innermost to you must be you. There's something inner to the body, there's something inner to the mind also, but the you, the real you, there's nothing inner to you. You are the innermost of all of them. Innermost means the core of it all, the heart of it all. Let's put it this way. If these sounds like a mystical language, it isn't. One can trace it out in one's own experience and get a feel for it. Yes, I am at the center of all of these experiences. That is the innermost. Sarvantare. Tat sati bhavati, na sati. That being conscious experience is possible, Shankaracharya says. Without that, with all the equipment, there won't be any conscious experience. And but now we know that. We have this amazing equipment in front of me. See this equipment, the computer and the camera and the microphone. Yes, there is an ear here, the microphone. Yes, there are eyes here, the camera. And there is a kind of a mind here, the CPU in this computer. And yet, this ear does not hear. That eye does not see. This computer does not have the experience of thinking while doing all the processing and delivering the results. It behaves as if it is hearing because it picks up sound. It behaves as if it is seeing because it picks up my pictures. It behaves as if it is thinking far more powerfully, faster than any human mind could, because it's delivering results. And yet internally, in the computer, in the camera, in the microphone, there is no conscious experience at all. Why not? So he says, without that light, conscious experience is not possible. And then he quotes from the Upanishads, very famous Tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. One of the most poetical parts of the Upanishads is that na tatra suryo bhati, na chandra tarakam, nema vidyuto bhanti, kutoyam agni, tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam, tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. This mantra, um, you find it in Katha Upanishad, you find it in Mundaka Upanishad, both of which we have done. But you find it in Shvetashvatara Upanishad also. 3 Upanishads you find this mantra. And what does it say? The sun cannot illumine pure consciousness. Moon or the lightning or the stars or even this mere fire, they cannot. No, material light cannot illumine the self. But that shining, tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam, that shining, everything else shines. By its light, everything here is lit up. You shining, everything here shines. When you shine, you as consciousness, you're of course always shining. And then the mind is lit up. All thoughts, memories, likes, dislikes, everything, problems, solutions, everything is revealed to you. Waking, dreaming, sleeping, all is revealed to you by you shining. And then the eyes and the ears and all, they are all lit up and they illumine everything else. So you shining, all the other instruments start shining and they reveal the world to you. So he quotes that, Shankaracharya quotes that, and a number of other sources from the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita to show all of them, all these Upanishads and the Gita and these texts, they're all talking about this unique thing called consciousness. He mentions that. Several wonderful quotations. Then he says, Shrotradyeva sarvasyatma bhutam chetanam iti prasiddham tadiha nivatyate. What is being said here sort of concludes, people think that the activities of the senses and the mind, this is consciousness and this constitutes us. Who am I? I am this mind, these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, this memory, this person, this seeing, this hearing, this smelling, this tasting, touching. So this person with its sensory activities and motor activities, such and such a person I am. And Shankaracharya says that is being denied here. You cannot, this sensory equipment, this physical equipment is not enough to explain consciousness. Therefore, that is being denied. Just imagine, this is where we are at right now. Our entire biological science, our brain science, our neuroscience, our philosophy of mind, and we understand. The advantage is now we are beginning to understand. There are many thinkers who are beginning to understand that a purely material explanation is not enough. 1200 years ago, Shankaracharya says it's not enough. That is being denied here by saying all of this is explanation of year of the year. Otherwise, how am I hearing? Answer is by your ears. How am I seeing? By your eyes. How am I thinking? By your mind. Said, no, no, no. What you're asking about, this conscious experience of life, cannot be explained by the mechanisms of senses or mind or body. Then what is being claimed here? Shankaracharya writes, Asti kimapi vidvat buddhigamyam sarvantaratamam kutastham ajaram amritam abhayam shrotraderaphi shrotradi. So he says, there is, and this is the claim, there is something which is graspable, realizable, vidvat buddhigamyam. The serious seeker, it literally means the knowledgeable seeker. By the intellect, by the understanding of the knowledgeable seeker, who is helped by the pointers from these Upanishads. The Vidwan here means the person who is equipped with these pointers, who has studied Vedanta, has got these pointers from Vedanta, and then thinks accordingly. That person can grasp. It's not just speculation. You can grasp it for yourself. In fact, the whole point is to grasp it for yourself. Sarvantaratamam, the innermost reality. The innermost reality is not the brain. Innermost reality is not even the mind. There is something deeper than that. Kutastham. So that which exists in the middle of this. Kutastham means existing in the middle of a heap. Kuta means heap. In this middle of this heap, in this heap, it exists. Ajam, unborn. It was not created with the creating of the body. Ajaram, undecaying. It does not age. It does not age. Consciousness does not age. Body ages, brain ages, and the effects are felt on the mind also, but not consciousness. Amritam, undying. Abhayam, beyond fear. Grounded in the body, I am subject to fear. COVID will come. I need to take this vaccination, that vaccination, fear. Grounded in this mind, fear. People can be nasty to me. There can be dishonor, there can be failure, there can be disaster. And all the problems in the world I understand through the mind, fear. But grounded in consciousness, you're beyond fear. Abhayam. You realize you are the reality of this universe and not the other way around, which is the ear of the ear. Shrotradir, Shrotradi. And then he says, therefore, iti prativachanam shabdarthascha upapadyate iti tat samarthya nimittam. By this is proven the appropriateness of the style of the reply, the manner of replying, and the meaning, shabdartha, what is being said by ear of the ear. All of this was to explain ear of the ear. And then he starts the next one, mind of the mind. And then he goes on exactly the same way. The mind by itself, he says, something as subtle as the mind. Chaitanya Jyotishi, Didhiti, without the light of consciousness, even the movements of the mind cannot be illumined. Iha buddhi manasi ekikritya nirdesho manasaiti. Here the teaching has been given by taking mind and intellect together. Normally in Vedanta we say mind, intellect, memory, ego. Manabuddhi chitta hankara. Here it's the whole thing is taken together. Saying mind, just saying mind. There is some grammatical stuff here which I am skipping. Interesting point he says here. prana. The word prana means life. And he says, Vedanta claims that yes, it's because of life. There's a life principle. There's a principle of vitality because of which this body is alive. And when the body dies, what it means in Vedantic terms is the prana goes. Not only Vedantic terms, all Indian systems. In fact, all ancient systems, the thought of life being a kind of air, the vital force in this body, that leaves the body. In most Indian languages, death is expressed as pran nikal gaya, pran chalega say in Bengali. So the prana is left. Vedanta says, no, life, the deeper mystery of life is not just this prana. Beyond the prana is the prana of the prana. The life of the life is consciousness. It is because of the presence of consciousness that life functions. So it is for the purpose of consciousness that there is such a thing as life, and it inhabits a body, enlivens a body, and gives experiences to consciousness. These are very ancient Sankhyan ideas. All of these, life and body, these are all Prakriti, nature, and all of it functions for the sake of consciousness. So, another question here is raised, just to give a sampling of what kind of discussion is going on in Shankaracharya's commentary. The student asked this question, just a minute. Look at the question which was asked by the student. So, by what does my mind think? But then the question has been asked, how do I see? How do I hear? And then prana is mentioned. Now, the student says, why did you interpret prana as life? Because another meaning of prana is smell. So, in that group of questions, how do the eyes see? How do the ears hear? It's natural to also ask, how does the nose smell? But instead of saying that, why did you say prana is life? Why did you interpret it as life? And so that's the question. Shrotradi Indriya Prastave, in the question about ears, eyes, pranasyeva grahanam, ghanasyeva grahanam yuktam natu pranasya. You should have taken the word prana as meaning smell, because it does mean smell also, instead of taking it as the life principle. But the teacher seems to have taken it as the life principle, is trying to answer it that way. Shankaracharya says in reply, Satyam evam, that's true, what you're saying is true. However, prana grahanena eva tu granasya grahanam kritam eva manyate shrutihi. He says, but think about it, even if you take the word prana as life itself, in life is included breathing. That's the first sign of life. And when you breathe, air going in through your nose, smell automatically works that way. So the activity of smell is automatically included among the many functions which work with the help of prana, life. So what you're asking, that why is it not a question about smell? That's included when you talk about life. Another way of approaching this, of course, would be if you look back at the original question of the student, Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Mano Yad Vacho Havas. So question was, Kene Shitam Patati Preshitam Mana Kena Prana Prathama Prayeti Yuktaha. The word Prathama, which means first, has been used in conjunction with the word prana, which is either life forces or organ of smell. But the word first, when you use it in conjunction with prana, it always refers to life. In Sanskrit, Mukhya Prana. Prathama Prana always means Mukhya Prana. So, life forces. The answer is that literally in the student's question, already it's been indicated he's interested in how does life function here. And Shankaracharya quotes earlier in the commentary that he quotes a beautiful passage from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Ko heva anyat kaf pranyat yadi esha akasha anando nasyat. Beautiful thing from Brahmananda Valli in the Taittiriya Upanishad. It goes like this. Who here could breathe in? Who here could breathe out if this sky of bliss were not there? very poetic way of saying sky of bliss means consciousness, your real nature. It's Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. So if you, this Chidakasha, the sky of consciousness, Taittiriya Upanishad says it's Anandakasha, the sky of delight. If the sky of delight were not there, who indeed here would breathe in, who would breathe out? In other words, prana, this is a poetic way of saying prana, life functions for the benefit of and under the illumination of consciousness. So that's the answer to the question. That solves the question, why should it be life forces and not the organ of smell? Like this, discussion goes on. And then one more point and then I'll stop. Shankaracharya also points out, Jnanad hi amritatvam prapyate. Notice, the teacher has said, Atimuchya dhira, by knowing this entity, which is the ear of the ear, the speech of the speech, the mind of the mind, the life of the life, and the eye of the eye. By knowing this entity, the dhira, the qualified student, transcends all the problems of life. Atimutya, while living in this body, not after death. One sadhu said, ये nakad मामला hai Mahatma ji. This is dealing in cash, not in credit. So it's not something that is promised to you after death. Right now, the results will be seen. So in this body, in this life, while you are thinking, while you are speaking, while you are seeing, hearing, living, in this life, you will transcend problems of life, the fear of life, all of it will be transcended. How is that possible? Jnanat, by realization of this entity. How? I am that entity. I am that which is meant by ear of the ear, speech of the speech, life of the life, mind of the mind, eye of the eye. And then he says, Dhiraha, enlightened one who is, he says, Vishishtadhi matvam antarena. So this is a person who has an exceptional understanding. What kind of understanding? Who studies these Upanishads, understands it, and the mind is strong enough, pure enough, focused enough, attentive enough to execute it in life. So I understand something and then I live accordingly. Such a person is called a dhiraha. In our Vedanta, we'll say such a person has to have the fourfold qualification. The viveka, vairagya, the 6 disciplines, and intense desire for freedom, mumukshutvam. The fourfold qualification, the seeker equipped with the fourfold qualification here is called dhira. This is the person who will be able to grasp what is being taught and indeed live it. Then the person will get the benefit from it. Pretya asmat lokat, Shankaracharya explains. Literally, what the teacher has said is leaving this world. Now, Shankaracharya says it has 2 meanings. One is vyavritya asmat lokat putra mitra kalatra bandhusho mamahang bhava sangyavahara lakshanat tyakta sarveshana bhutva ityarthaha amrita bhavati. While living in this body, he is able to see oneself as unattached, asanga, with husband, wife, children, house, relatives, good and the bad in the world, one's own body and mind. These are all appearances in me, the one consciousness. The one who is able to see that very clearly and live accordingly. That person has transcended this body while living in this body. That's one meaning. The other meaning is literally when departing from this world. When this body dies, you are freed from the cycle of birth and death. Yes. So that was Shankaracharya's take on the teaching of the teacher. This is the most important mantra of the whole Upanishad, but this will be expanded upon. This Upanishad is very dramatic. So almost every mantra has dramatic statements and twists and turns in the plot. Now the student after hearing this, he'll say, this is amazing. We are all excited to hear this. Oh, so this is what he's talking about. This is about me, my real nature, already available. How do I realize it? Please teach me. And the teacher will say now, I don't know. I can't teach you. Why not? Because I don't know it myself. It's so shocking. The teacher will say, I don't know it myself. How can I teach you? And not only that, I have no idea how it can be taught. We know what the teacher is trying to say, that it cannot be objectified, it cannot be taught directly. But then what is the way of teaching and what is the way of becoming enlightened? That will come next, and so on. But we'll stop here. We'll take a few of the observations and questions. Peter says, can the silence between two thoughts be appointed to pure consciousness? Yes. In fact, Shankaracharya in his, I think, Laghu Vakya Vritti, he points to this. One practice could be that there is a gap between two instants of thoughts, two vrittis. And the pure consciousness, you, is more clear, easily caught there. However, it's also very clear in while thinking. See, the Upanishad here actually asks us to focus on thinking and speaking and actually seeing and breathing and all of that, all of our conscious experiences. And not even in the gaps between the experiences, in these experiences and indeed in the gaps also, how to make it evident that I am pure consciousness. Sanket says, Shabda pravritti nimitta rahitatvat. Shabda pravritti, Shabda means language, pravritti, usage, nimitta, causes or instigators, rahita, devoid of. Because the ultimate reality is devoid of the instigators of linguistic usage, you cannot speak about it. You can't use language about it. Sanket says, none of the 5 aspects of language works for Brahman. Can it be argued that Brahman does not exist? Yes, it can be argued, and it has been argued. So we will see how, even though language cannot point to it, we have to admit that Brahman exists. That was Shankaracharya's argument here. Because we have this conscious experience and you can't explain it in any way. Using the language of the Upanishad, the Taittiriya Upanishad, the physical body is not enough to explain consciousness, Annamaya Kosha. The pranic body, Pranamaya Kosha, is not enough to explain consciousness. The mental body, Manomaya Kosha, the intellect, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and the causal body, Anandamaya Kosha, none of them are enough to explain why we are having conscious experiences. He says, Phala avasanatvat. He says, this Phalavasana lingatvat. By the sign that of the conscious experience, the sign, the clue, the reason why we are all saying we are at all engaging in this discussion is that we are having conscious experiences and we can't explain it. We cannot explain it by the body. We're trying to. A materialist reductionist is trying to explain it through nervous system and brain. But neither by that's just the Annamaya Kosha. The Upanishad will say, let alone the Annamaya Kosha. We are unable to explain it through Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. And therefore, we must admit that Atman or Brahman exists. John Lewis says, and Margaret, all sense data is presented to awareness, in awareness, and nothing but awareness. Is this the meaning of the eye, of the eye, ear, of the? Absolutely. This is the precise meaning. Abhijit says, if ChatGPT starts saying tomorrow it is having conscious experience, would we infer that it is conscious? No, we cannot. We cannot. Humans misinterpret many of the experiences. So why is human testimony about their experience a pramana? The second part I don't understand. Abhijit, would you unmute yourself and explain the second part of it?
Yes, Pranam Swamiji. Now, my question was, we can always program a AI which says it's conscious.
Yes.
And humans do make so many mistakes about their perceptions.
Yes.
And so when we say we are conscious,
yes.
we may be mistaking it for something else.
Yes.
Some kind of reflected consciousness, some kind of thing which gives an apparent illusion of something more. And so why is the human testimony that we are conscious not prone to error? if ChatGPT, we don't believe ChatGPT, why should we believe you?
Because first of all, when we understand what consciousness is, what our experience is consciousness plus object, something presented to us as to our consciousness. It is so pervasive, it's totally pervasive throughout our lives. It's impossible to deny consciousness. If you deny consciousness, that also requires consciousness. In fact, when you say correct or wrong or error, Vedanta would say the correct knowledge, prama, or incorrect perception, aprama, both of these are presentations to consciousness. It requires consciousness to illumine them. So consciousness is prior to correct knowledge also. Any kind of knowledge, consciousness is prior to that. And for ChatGPT and the other AIs, why should we say they are not conscious? Right now we can say they are not conscious because for common sense reasons. If you ask, for example, I can give you one reason. If you ask the experts, those who are programming these ChatGPT and all, how much effort they have put in to make it creative, how much money, how much hours and hours of training and huge computing power for various functions they perform. Now, if you ask how much programming did they put in to make it conscious, how much, what was the budget for the consciousness aspect of ChatGPT, they will say zero, nothing, because first of all, we don't even understand what it is and what consciousness is. We don't even know where to begin to make it conscious, and we wouldn't even know how, if it was conscious, how would you know at all? So our overwhelming common sense would say that consciousness is not one of the features of AI so far. Now one might ask here is it impossible? No, because what we mean practically by consciousness right now is reflected consciousness, chidabhasa.
Right.
And reflected consciousness just requires a substrate which can reflect or channelize consciousness and use it for these practical purposes. If you can design such a substrate, since Vedanta claims consciousness is everywhere, consciousness is the fundamental reality and ubiquitous everywhere, and then wherever you design such a substrate, it will reflect consciousness and it will start acting conscious then, or it will internally feel conscious. So that is not denied. But even there, that's the beauty of this question. Even then, if you can design an artificial thing which will reflect consciousness and become conscious just like us, it will become practically for all purposes, it will become a jiva. Even then, you would not be able to explain why that thing became conscious. That substrate will not be enough. That's what Shankaracharya's thing is. That what is being denied here is precisely that. The entire mechanism by itself is not enough to explain why it suddenly is conscious. You can go up to saying that it is congenial to reflect consciousness. It's like saying the moon suddenly in the night, this one body glows so much, it illumines the whole earth. And yet we know that there is no luminosity in the moon.
Right.
Where did this light come from? Now this moonlight requires both things. It requires the sun, which is the unseen source of the light at night, but it also requires a reflector like the moon. Similarly, so our conscious experiences require both some source of consciousness and an instrument which can borrow that source of consciousness, like the mind and the senses. Yeah. Priyanka says, when do we say that an entity reflects consciousness? When it produces internal I state? Yes, but it produces an internal, you might say, qualia, subjective experiences. In Vedic cosmology, aren't even elemental forms in inert bodies like planets supposed to have internal subtle state? No, they don't. It's only jivas which have internal subtle states. And what you are asking about are the devatas. So devatas have internal subtle states and they are in charge of these elemental powers. But the material things by themselves do not have internal subtle states. To have an internal subtle state, you require a subtle body, sukshma sharira. Kiran says ear indicates the subject and ear the object. Yes, ear of the ear. Ear of the ear, the second ear is the outer ear, the physical ear, the object, which gives you information, which brings in auditory information. But the ear of the ear, the inner thing which is mentioned, is consciousness, is the Atman. Girish says, as the carbon-based neural hardware, the brain can be used as reflector in universal consciousness. Can future silicon-based hardware similarly reflect universal consciousness to some extent, thus making a machine conscious? Yes, that's what I was saying. Why not in principle? We don't have any idea how it can be done, and clearly we are so far barking up the wrong tree, because our most sophisticated machines also, and this AI also, which is so well able to replicate our other functions of the mind, like sensory functions, like thinking, all the questions which the student is asking except life, all our material, our AI computers, they can replicate. In one sense, they have eyes and they have ears, this microphone and the camera, and they have a brain, they have a mind also, the software and hardware of these machines. And the new AIs, they can replicate the activities of our subtle body, decision making, creativity, all sorts of things. And yet they are somehow not conscious, as far as we know. So right now we are barking up the wrong tree, but in principle, why not? Bhargav asks, why does it feel like I'm two persons? A good question. Because we are. Yes, because of exactly the year of the, because that of the mind of the mind. The mind is one person, and the mind of the mind is the real person. Swami Vivekananda gave a talk, the real and the apparent man. Upanishad talks about, in Mundaka Upanishad we did, the higher bird and the lower bird. So it's not that we are two persons, there is you, the real you, and there is the person you. Shekhar says, in Ekashloki, Shankaracharya explains light of light. Yes, it's based on the Brihadaranyaka, but light of light. Janhavi says, Sant Chokamela, the Varkari saint, writes a song, translates as the ear of the ear, the nose of the nose, tongue of the tongue, that is my Vitthala, the bliss behind every happiness, the consciousness behind every knowledge, the Atman that pervades one and all, that is my Vitthala. Thus reflecting the most beautiful confluence of true jnana with pure bhakti. Yes, absolutely. I didn't know about this, but it's not at all surprising, because Upanishadic teachings, Vedanta, and our popular Hinduism, Bhakti Hinduism, for example, is one continuity. There are scholars who foolishly try to make a distinction between what they call Brahminical or high Hinduism and folk Hinduism. No, it is one continuity. You will find ideas in devotional language, in the simple language of the rural people. And the ideas are drawn directly from the Upanishads, from Vedanta. So it is the same teaching which is embodied in the Puranas, for example, the stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the various Puranic stories. Ramayana, Mahabharata are itihasas and Puranic stories. But the idea behind all these stories was to embody these highest ideas of pure consciousness, Atman, Brahman. Rick says, I wonder if modern Sankhyans will insist that material universe is separate from consciousness, since physics says if you go deep enough, there is no physicality. True. What the Sankhyans evolved into finally was, on one hand, Buddhism, on the other hand, modern Vedanta. Mircea Eliade, who was a great scholar of religion, who studied in India under Professor Surendranath Dasgupta, he later taught, I think, the University of Chicago, I think. So in one of his books, he says the ancient philosophy, most ancient philosophy is Sankhya, and consciousness and nature, Purusha and Prakriti. What Buddha did was, he threw the Purusha into Prakriti. It's just all change, no permanent entity. Even consciousness is just flashes of movements of the buddhi. And what Shankara did, what Vedanta did was, it took Prakriti and threw it into Purusha. It made Prakriti the power of consciousness, Maya. So that's a nice way of putting it. Kaustavi says, if purely material explanation is not enough and spiritual interpretation can possibly result from spiritual philosophical investigation of conscious experience, then what is the need for the role of religions in this logical progression? Is God a philosophical construct? Or the need of religion is very much there. Because remember, for the Upanishads, for Vedanta, it is not just an explanation. It's a complete philosophy of life which will help. You have to supposed to live it and then get the benefit from it, to transcend fear, to attain fulfillment, to overcome suffering. That was the project. And the technology of doing this is religion. Especially, if you don't take it in this Vedantic sense, if you take the Atman, Brahman, the ear of the ear, eye of the eye, as the saint did, make it Vithala, my Krishna, then that becomes religion. The same Advaita becomes religion. Same Kena Upanishad becomes religion. Now it will easily fit into Vaishnavism, for example. You love Vithala, you love Krishna, but what's the real nature of Krishna? The real nature of Krishna is, he is the ear of your ear, the mind of your mind, the eye of your eye, the speech of your speech. But you will say, but that's me, that's I. Yes, that is what your real Krishna is. The real Krishna and you are one and the same. Sonali says, bringing internal conscious experience to AI would be equivalent of bringing humans back from the dead by enabling subtle body, including prana, to function again. Similarly, yes. But nature is already doing that. We will only be replicating in a crude way, which nature is already doing. Subtle body goes into new bodies. Why bring it back into an old dead body? You can, what the subtle body does is it goes into a new baby body and is reborn there as a fresh baby. The subtle body is very ancient. Thousands of births it has undergone. Your data is very ancient. Just the hardware is new each time. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.